All right, everybody. Let's just go through some basic stuff about chapter one so I can show you the relevant parts of the book. Um, let's see here. So, this is your textbook, as you saw, and just looking through what you should take from chapter one as briefly as possible, right? We have a couple of concepts that are important. The first and most obvious one is just the concept of an argument, right? And so I want you to understand the concept of an argument. Sorry for the scrolling. Hopefully, it's not making you too dizzy. Um, Arguments involve two components. So I'll just sort of verbalize this and you can write it down as I'm saying it. Um, there's two components. There's a conclusion and then there's what you're trying to prove, right? Sorry, there's a conclusion and then there's premises. So goes the idea of having you write it down as I say it if I mess it up like that. So sorry about that. So again, there's two parts to an argument. There's a conclusion and then there's the premises. The conclusion is what you're trying to prove, right? And then the premises are your reasons for thinking the conclusion are true. And you can think about arguments, I think the best way to sort of grasp the phenomenon, like the sort of guiding example, and I'll try to do this throughout the course. Think about them as coming up in conversations, right? Where somebody says something and it's going to be something controversial, right? And then somebody asks the question, why do you think that's true? And then somebody answers that, right? So if I say, let me break my rule and just give you a little visual aid here. There's the syllabus. We were just talking about that. Um, Sorry. Hopefully you have a playback speed option here. So suppose I have this argument, all dogs are mammals. And then let's try to think of like a real dog. So my dog, Annie, she's a border collie, she's downstairs. And then in the class we'll have, and in the book, I think he does it as well. We'll have as a convention, we'll draw a line there, not a particularly dark line, is it? What follows? So all dogs are mammals. Annie is a dog. Therefore, what does it say? It speak awkwardly into the camera, even though no one's around or your family's around you. Annie is a mammal. Did you speak awkwardly? All right, that's a test for what kind of student you are. Are you going to go along with this or are you going to just fake it? All right. Annie is a mammal. So that's an argument. So this would be the conclusion, and these would be the premises, right? So this would be what I'm trying to prove, and this would be my reasons for thinking it's correct. Now, as I said, you can imagine a conversation. So this would be not a very interesting or realistic conversation because it's usually it's going to happen only when something's controversial. But suppose it was controversial that Annie was a mammal. I don't know, maybe there was like a room over there where there was a bunch of reptiles and mammals all named Annie, and I picked an animal randomly from that room, and you're like, well, maybe it's a reptile. So I say, Annie's a mammal. That's what I think is true. And you say, why do you think that's true? And I look at what I plucked from the room, and it's my dog. I said, well, why do I think it's true that Annie is a mammal? Because Annie's a dog, and as you know, all dogs are mammals. Right. So that would be the argument, and that would be the kind of the conversation that we would have, right? So really what the class is about, and as the chapter details, um, coming back to that, I got to fix all this in post, right? Um, but I'm not going to. Really what the class is about is argument analysis. And there's two steps to it, as it mentioned. And oh, I went up too far. There's reconstructing the argument, and then there's evaluating the argument. So uh, that's really the class in a nutshell. And there's obviously everything that goes into reconstructing and everything that goes into evaluating the argument. And so you can think about it like this. We're going to start with the messiness of real life, right? Where people have conversations, right? Or maybe it's where people write something. That's another argumentative context, like an opinion piece, right? So don't get me wrong, there's plenty of argumentative context. I think the conversation one is the central one that helps grasp everything. So I think it's like the core phenomenon, but it comes up in opinion pieces. It comes up in obviously papers if you've ever written a argumentative paper and so on and so forth, right? But that's like messy, real life, right? People talking, people having a discussion, someone writing something. And the reconstructing the argument is the sort of the process of taking the messy real life thing and extracting an argument from it, where the argument takes the form of something clean, like the all dogs are mammals thing, right? And that is sort of the artistic portion of the class because there's an art to that, right? For example, uh, if we were actually having a conversation, I would probably say something like, Annie's a mammal, so I plucked her from, I like my example now. I plucked her from the Annie reptile mammal room over there. Everybody's named Annie. And I say, Annie's a mammal. Got it. Annie's a mammal. And you say, here's Annie. And you go, why do you think Annie's a mammal? I'd probably just say, because Annie's a dog. Don't you see? So I wouldn't say in the messy real life context, in other words, that all dogs are mammals. Leave that implicit, right? But nevertheless, so the parentheses are meant to imply the implicitness of it. Nevertheless, it's part of the argument. I mean, the only reason I offered the claim that Annie is a dog is because I do also think that all dogs are mammals, in other words, right? So the art is taking the messiness of real life and extracting the argument from it, right? And I emphasize the idea that it's an art. I mean, if you want me to say, well, no, when you do this, there's one way to do it and only one way to extract the argument, that would be misleading. This is, if you like, an interpretation process. We are taking a messy piece of text and we are interpreting it in the sense of trying to find the argument that's found therein. Okay? So that's the artistic phase. If you're somebody who has that kind of bent, that kind of mindset, you're going to like that part of it. But then the next part of the argument analysis, so I'm not going to go back to the book, but maybe you have it in front of you, is the evaluating. That's the scientific phase of the class, right? So there's a art to a reconstructing argument, and there's a science to evaluate it. And what I mean by that is like this is very black and white, and usually it is, not always, black and white how to evaluate the argument, right? All dogs are mammals. Annie is a dog, therefore Annie is a mammal. Every time I have a dog in front of me, I have a mammal in front of me. Annie's one of those dogs that I have in front of me, therefore Annie is a mammal. It's 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? It's that simple. That's what I mean when I say it's a science. Okay, so that's really what the class is about, very, very crudely. And we'll get into all the steps found therein. Okay. And the only other thing I'd like to say about chapter one, I'm going to try to keep this brief for your benefit, is the rest of the stuff is like the application of it, right? And how it like comes up and how people treat arguments, for example, what kind of person are you? How do you deal with arguments? That's like the other part of the class, other part of the chapter that I want to flag. And the only thing I'll say is, look, the core, the core use of this class, right? So sorry, let me just shout here. What is argument analysis, critical thinking good for, right? Where argument analysis would be my term for both steps, reconstructing and evaluating. What is it good for? It's for figuring out what you ought to believe. Okay, that's it. So I want to be very, very upfront about this and very, very clear about this. If you think this class is going to get you good at debating people, You're wrong. I don't care about that. It's not a debate class. It's not about convincing others. The success of an argument, like whether or not you're good at it, whether you perform a critical evaluation or an argument evaluation well, does not hinge on whether anybody else believes it. Why? And this is where the book kind of gets into it, right? Because people are stubborn. People are ignorant. Maybe this is just my dim view of humanity. Maybe you have a rosier view of humanity than me. But you know, it's not going to work for all sorts of reasons. Maybe they have an agenda. Maybe I can't help but mention, maybe they have a political affiliation. Maybe they want to make money. So they're not going to be convinced and they've sort of gaslit themselves, deceived themselves into believing bullshit that makes them money. Gee, I wonder if we can think of any examples of that, right? So it's not about other people, it's about you and what you believe. So this class really is about personal growth. The idea is if you get better at doing this, you're going to help you revise your own beliefs. So you're damn right, you could gaslight and deceive yourself, but I'm hoping you see the value of this and you're willing to sort of get over any inclination you might have to do that. So yeah, if you live a life where you just tell yourself a bunch of bullshit so you can make money, you won't get a lot out of this class, but you do that to your own detriment, I hope you realize. So, I mean, I'm not going to have to sell the importance of critical thinking to you. I hope. I hope you see the potential value of it, right? So that's really it. Okay. We're going to be doing these, we're going to be looking at arguments, their structure, reconstructing and evaluating them, getting into excruciating detail in many cases about those steps involved in both of the main pillars of it. The reconstruction and the evaluation are the main pillars. But we're not going to do it to do anything else other than help you grow as a person. Okay? So I hope you find that useful. I hope you find that attractive. And therefore, like I said in the introductory video for the course, I hope you find philosophy attractive as well, because that's really what philosophy does. And that's kind of what I'm hoping to gear you up for is you're embarking on a journey where you discover the value of philosophy, generally speaking, for personal growth. All right. Hopefully that wasn't too bad. Stay tuned for chapter 2 video next week, folks. All right. Bye.